is the kind of thing that you can see someone granting a pardon on. I mean, it's the White Slave Trade Act. That's real difficult to sentence somebody on the White Slave Trade Act in 2025, just from, you know, a practical standpoint.
Okay.
The government failed miserably.
Yeah, well, they clearly have. Ariel Mitchell Kidd, you represent a number of women in civil cases against Sean Combs. What is your reaction to this verdict?
Well, I think it's important that we discuss the lack of diversity that was on the prosecution team. That was probably my most concern when I faced them, when I had a hearing for a motion to quash during the grand jury testimony. I was very concerned when I was looking across from me at 6 white women and them not being able to grasp just exactly how to convey what has occurred to a jury and being able to relate these things to a jury. Of course, my clients are very shocked at all of this. I am shocked. I'm actually very shocked at how they were able to reach the transportation aspect, but not the other 2 charges, because one kind of flows with the other.
Well, they don't though, really, do they? Because the transportation is that you're transporting people illegally across state lines for the purpose of prostitution. But that doesn't mean there's any coercion. And in fact, they have rejected all the charges which would then lead on to a coercive situation. No sex trafficking.
You can't cut me off and let me not finish my statement.
Sure.
So in reference to, first of all, the bar they have to meet. It's a very, very high bar in criminal court. It is beyond a reasonable doubt. So, of course, it's clear that he did these things, transporting people for prostitution, the prostitutes, like you just said, the Punisher, who you'll have later, and other men who have said they were transported, as well as if you are asking me where I think the prosecution fell short, was I think taking 6 weeks to put on their case was a mistake. It was overkill. I think had they shortened and streamlined their case, maybe in a 3-4 week at max point, they would have been successful.
And when you say the prosecution team wasn't diverse enough, what exactly do you mean? What are you saying?
There were 6 white women, so there was not any other voice other than a white woman's voice being heard. There was not a man's voice, a man's perspective of any race, let alone any other race, especially a Black voice, considering just how, I don't even know what the word impactful is, not even a good enough word to describe Diddy's, I want to say impacts, but that, again, that's not even a good enough word. His chokehold, I'll call it, on the Black community. So when I look at, like, for example, R. Kelly, who, in my opinion, didn't do half as much or a quarter as much as Diddy did, for him to be in jail for 25 years and Diddy to essentially be getting possibly 10 to 20 years, 10 years max on each count, I don't understand it.
Tax day has passed, but for millions of Americans, that's where the trouble begins. The IRS is now ramping up enforcement for those who missed the April deadline or still owe back taxes. Well, today's sponsor, Tax Network USA, can still help. If your books are a mess, if you're self-employed, or if you're a business owner, Tax Network USA specializes in cleaning up financial chaos and getting you back on track quickly. They say the IRS is applying enforcement pressure at levels they've never seen before. But even after the deadline, it's not too late to take control. The consultation is completely free. Acting now could stop penalties, threatening letters, and surprise levies before they escalate. Call 1-800-958-1000 or visit tnusa.com/peers. That's tnusa.com/peers. Let Tax Network USA make the next move, not the IRS.
I think what Diddy did
could it be, Ariel?
And there was more evidence.
Could it be, Ariel, that we're just in different times, that when R. Kelly went down, we were still in the kind of full flow of the Me Too movement, the Time's Up campaign. There was a kind of, real zealous desire to put bad men away for long periods of time, Harvey Weinstein and others, and that the mood has changed somewhat now, and that people listen to the evidence, particularly with Cassie Ventura, where, you know, she settled with Diddy for, you know, a lot of money, many millions of dollars, had her rent paid, that she, in all the text messages that were leaked, carried on sending him very loving text messages, talking openly about wanting to do the freak-offs. The Punisher, who I'm going to interview again a little later in the show, you know, when I interviewed him, he was very persuasive that everything that he was involved in was not only consensual, but Cassie was the one driving it all. She was the one paying him. She was the one organizing everything. Diddy just sat in the corner watching them.
But let's be for real. Cassie didn't have her own money. So if that was the case, why did her parents need to take out a loan to pay Diddy for that $20,000?
But my question is,
so
whether
listen,
I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying.
And this was her thing.
Okay, but Ariel, you're missing my point. I'm not saying whether it's right or wrong. I'm saying, do you feel like there's a different mood now about these cases?
I would hate. I was about to say I was trying to get to what your question was, which is, I would hate to think that the application of the law is on the whim of the attitude of the people. So that's what you're implying, that because the wind has changed, there's an inappropriate application of law. And I would hate to think that we live in a society where that is occurring.
Okay. Bruce Rivers, I mean, you were very confident that he was going to go down to prison for the rest of his natural life. That is clearly not going to happen. So how do you feel about this verdict?
Well, I think the case was overcharged to begin with, and what the defense did in this case, they really focused on the free will of Cassie Ventura. When you have somebody that's a hanger-on, somebody that is getting something out of this, as opposed to somebody who's being forced into something, you know, that's where I think the defense really won the day. And you know, I was going basically on the sensationalistic nature of the conduct, because it really is bad. But when you really apply, I just tried one of these RICO cases here in Minneapolis on a gang case about a month and a half ago, and it's really easy to prove. But the thing about it is here, the court can use some of this this acquitted conduct in sentencing, and so. It's the final chapter hasn't been written. You know, I know
he may still get a substantial prison sentence, you think?
He could. He could. The average person wouldn't, but the average person doesn't have all this other conduct. You know that. You know.
But how much of that is relevant to what a judge may decide should be a sentence? I mean, I don't think this judge is going to. I mean, the judge, for example, can't bring in the appalling beating video because the statute of limitations is over for that, right? It's not even relevant legally.
Oh, sure it is. All the conduct of Diddy throughout this whole thing is relevant. You know, the judge will take into consideration the whole picture of Diddy, not just the offense for which he's charged. You know, he's got what I think he's like 7 months in or something like that. So if you just look at the low end of the guidelines, he's almost got that served. And so a judge may say, this is not what the message I want to send to the public, you know, and the judge very well, he could sentence him consecutively. I doubt that he's going to, but
hasn't the jury, look, I mean, isn't the bottom line here that the jury seems to have concluded, and we may hear from some jurors, but, you know, I've just seen a statement from Cassie Ventura's lawyer, Doug Wigdor. He says, we're just pleased that he still faces substantial jail time, or that remains to be seen. By coming forward with her experience, Cassie left an indelible mark on both the entertainment industry and the fight for justice. She displayed unquestionable strength and brought attention to the realities of powerful men in our orbit and the misconduct that's persisted for decades without repercussion. I'm not sure she has established that in terms of the eyes of the jury. You know, I share the general view that video of Diddy beating her up in the hotel corridor was disgusting. He's clearly an appalling woman beater. However, that's not what he was charged with. And in terms of the charges, it just seems to me they didn't establish that any of this was non-consensual.
There's some truth to that, but they could have decided the RICO on the fact that there wasn't an enterprise. I mean, they could have we don't know why they acquitted on the RICO. On the sex trafficking, you know, it has to be forced, fraud, or coercion, but they could have acquitted on something else. it's pretty. And I think one of the things, like you said, Pierce, is that they really focused on the free will, and they had plenty of evidence to back that up. All the text messages saying, "I can't wait for the freak off."
Right.
I mean,
but I found, listen, as somebody, just looking at it with a journalist eye, I found that pretty persuasive for the defense. And again, I think it comes back. I mean, I'll bring Matthew back in here. The reason I mentioned the changing mood really about these kind of stories is that I think that people have become a little bit more cynical about cases where women have stayed in touch with the alleged abuser in a very loving and apparently very consensual way for a long period after the abuse is said to have happened. And then you add in the fact that there was a big settlement and Cassie took all that money and so on and so on. I think when you put it all together, a lot of people may feel differently now than they would have done, in 2019, 2020.
Now, first of all, R. Kelly got convicted because he was screwing kids. That's the big difference. To equate R. Kelly with Puff, it's wrong and it's silly and it's nonsensical. R. Kelly was guilty of screwing around with kids. No time 50 years ago or 50 years from now will that be okay. This was a bad case. No one believed Cassie. Here's all you need to know. Every single count in which the credibility of the alleged victims was put into question, the jury came back 36 times and said not guilty. Every single case, every single charge that had anything to do with Cassie or with Jane, the jury absolutely did not believe them, found them to not be credible, even to the extent to convict someone who's on a video beating the living.
So y'all can see the position that Ariel Mitchell takes, because she's representing many clients that's civil suits against Diddy. But what you got to understand is the counts that Diddy was found guilty of is transportation of individuals across state lines for prostitution, and that's quite different than the money that she's seeking for her clients. So therefore, his not guilty counts or his acquittals, the jury's finding, will be used in his behalf. But let's see what this gentleman has to say about that, and then we'll take a fresh look at it. Because, like always, today you think one thing, you learn some information, and then you think something else. So we can go ahead with it. Let's go.
Not out of the woman. That tells you all you need to know about the case. The media and people, lawyers, plaintiffs' lawyers who wanted to sue him said, oh, she's so convincing. It's hard to feel sorry for a woman who's instructing a sex worker on how to urinate in their mouth and telling her how to do it. And the Punisher, who I think is just an absolute star, explained this in to such a point of view, I would threw my hands up because I literally go, I don't know, you can't have better testimony than that.
So just one more thing, guys, before I let this finish playing. You got to be careful. A lot of this is hyperbole. A lot of it is embellishment. Sometimes, every now and then, people may not mean it, but they're outright lying. But let's see.
Other than when Jane said she thought that P. Diddy was a cuckold. And if the prosecution, if they didn't think they had to do it, the defense didn't think they had to do it, they could have called, any head of the human sexuality department and said, tell us about the swingers lifestyle, tell us about water games, tell us about this, put on the videos. That's clearly what it was. We don't have to guess because the jury has told us they believed what the defense team put out there. And Tenny Garagos from the very beginning set the stage for this, the tenor. This is all consensual. It's nothing coerced. And the jury believed every single word of it.
Yeah.
The two convictions are just based upon plane tickets and receipts. That's all. It literally didn't need any testimony from any of the two alleged victims. And I don't know why we're calling them, other than the videotape. In this case, they were found not to be victims. They were found to be incredible witnesses, and the evidence from their own mouths and their own fingertips and their own text messages proved that they shouldn't be believed, and the jury obliged them and didn't believe a word they said.
Yes, true. Ariel, in terms of the women you represent with civil actions against Sean Combs, how much will this verdict affect those? I mean, does it make it more difficult now to win a civil case?
Before I get into that, I want to just address this verdict really just goes to show how much women are really truly not believed.
What if they're not telling the truth? Many of us carry around bulky, worn-out wallets.
Are actually starting to be heard, and now we're just going back to regular status quo.
No, that's not true. No.
Treated as liars and martyrs.
No, hang on.
Story has to withstand scrutiny.
Hang on one sec. I was going to say, Ariel, just to be clear, they have been heard, right? They went into a criminal court.
I said believed. I said we are back.
Can you not interrupt me, given you didn't want me interrupting you? Thank you. They have been heard for 6 weeks, and they weren't believed. So it's not a question of women not being heard. They've had their chance to try and prove their case, and so much evidence came out which contradicted what they had to say, including very powerful evidence from the Punisher, who I'm about to interview. But this idea that somehow this is about women being silenced, not being heard and so on, the complete opposite has happened. And what you're actually doing is you're saying this jury of 12 Americans didn't know what they were doing or had some weird desire not to listen to women. It seems to me they listened very carefully to the evidence and they've reached a conclusion they didn't believe these women. And you know what, Ariel? Sometimes women lie.
I'm not saying, but okay, who's saying that people lie? Women or men? Men lie, women lie, numbers don't. So we all know that.
So why are you saying it's a throwback to when women weren't believed?
Women are not being believed. So there were 8 men on a jury who, again, I'm saying to say they heard them, I don't think they did. So believe them definitely, because you can't believe somebody if you not truly are listening to them. Why? Because you're
that's
never
outrageous slur. You've got no evidence they didn't listen to them.
No man on this panel, all 3 of you, will never be in a position of any woman in any scenario where you can be taken advantage of, where you can be literally
abused.
What
are you talking about?
Not be heard
how many
and
women
be
have taken
believed
advantage
after
of
the
me?
fact. So I'm just saying there are 3 men who will, and 8 men on that jury who will never know what it's like. And instead of trying to understand the position that a woman could be in, and a woman like Cassie and a woman like the other Jane Does who testified in this matter, they completely disregarded it.
No, they didn't. They didn't disregard it. They didn't believe it.
I'll circle back to your question.
They didn't believe it. And what you're doing, you're basically saying no man can ever be on a jury fairly in a case like this. There's no evidence to suggest that whatsoever. The evidence was the evidence on the evidence. Ariel, on the evidence that was presented, if I'd been on that jury, I'd have come to the same conclusion.
A man, I would assume a man would.
Actually,
so
most women I know who studied the evidence properly also reached that conclusion.
And it's some men I talk to who reach the opposite. So I'm not saying any men or all men, because every person is different. But what I'm saying is men in general the men who I know who do understand had women who experienced that, like their mothers. So they experience that in tandem with their mothers. So they have a better understanding of how abuse works, how the cycle of abuse works, how women typically go back to their abusers. But outside of that, you asked me about how did this affect my clients and our cases moving forward. It does not. This case had no effect and would have no effect. We have our own bars that we need to meet in terms of the preponderance of the evidence that we need to reach in our cases. And we are also glad, just in the same voice with Mrs. Ventura, that Diddy will be going to jail. He has skirted, and for there to be this assertion that Diddy has been this law-abiding citizen who hasn't been through this multiple times before, this is really just the only time he got caught up. So I think all of that will affect him, and we are very happy to see him be convicted. We are very happy to see what type of jail time he faces, and we are more excited to litigate our cases against him.
Final word to you, Bruce, just quickly.
The women's cases were heard. They had to withstand scrutiny. The jury, that included women, were unanimous in their rejection of their story. Simple as that. And he is going to get some significant prison time, and he's already done significant jail time. So, hopefully he engages in other behavior, not so risky.
Yeah, I agree. Panel, thank you all.
If numbers don't lie, it's 30. Let me say this. If numbers don't lie, it was 36-0. 36-0. In the counts in which the women jurors and the male jurors were asked, do you believe what Cassie and Jane Doe say? 36-0 said we do not believe him.
Yep. Which
Numbers
is
don't lie.
pretty overwhelming, you might think. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. Well, Young Jock and Sammy the Bull are coming up momentarily, but I'm going to bring in a man whose testimony in the trial may have been a game changer. Male escort Sheree Hayes, known as the Punisher, was caught by the prosecution. As he later explained on Uncensored, it may have been more helpful to the defense.
Get any cues, didn't have any thing that would lead me to believe in the moment that she was under any duress or any force scenario. It was presented to me that this was something that she wanted to create for her husband.
Well, Sheree Hayes rejoins me now. Welcome back to Uncensored, Sheree. I really felt after the interview that we did, which followed you giving evidence, that you were a very powerful cog, I think, in the wheel for the defense of Diddy, because you spoke very openly, very honestly, I felt, and you made it crystal clear that from everything you had observed over, 18 months, 2 years, you'd never seen anything which you felt was non-consensual. And it seems that has been the conclusion that the jury has reached, not that women were not taken across state lines, which is obviously illegal if they're prostitutes, but that, men as well, but that actually that is the only thing which was wrong here, that actually there was no coercion or trafficking or people being made to do things against their will.
Yeah, I mean, that was my experience. Me taking a stand, I wanted to just be completely honest with the facts of what went on. And, something I will say is, as this went on over the course of 2.5 years, and I would have very personable one-on-one interaction with Kathy prior to the activity, and then also at the conclusion of the activity. And it was always good-spirited, good vibe, no indication that there was any issues, or not even any indication of being the slightest intoxicated, under the influence of any drugs or substances. And it was always a pleasant scenario that I told you I walked away with, actually feeling as like a positive thing that I was even involved. So everything threw me off with the allegations. I can only speak from my specific experience, but none of it never really added up to me.
So what's your response to the verdict?
I thought the verdict was what it was supposed to be. This is domestic violence. If you want to talk about domestic violence and his behavior in those situations, that's a different subject. But when you look at a 10-year relationship and mutual text messages expressing love and care, and at multiple points, excitement about the sexual activity, to then say, okay, I'm going to signal out a couple of instances and make it a crime, always to me was a stretch.
Do you feel, we were talking about it earlier, that there might be a changing mood about these kind of cases, that at the height of Me Too, there was a kind of frenzy, and, some very bad men clearly got the punishment they deserved. Others, many people felt there was a massive overreach. And a lot of those cases, which were messier, involved cases where there was lots of evidence after the alleged crime or claimed crime that, that everything was still very friendly, consensual, loving, and so on. Do you think that juries now maybe are less willing to convict people when that kind of evidence comes out than they may have been, say, 3-4 years ago?
I do. I think initially, because there was such a strong movement, right? And all of these cases and there was a neglect over years of women being hurt. And that was a real thing. But now, because there's so many scenarios of financial gain and a monetary gain based on these circumstances, the majority of these cases are filed civilly before they're filed criminally, right? And so I think it is just responsible, right, to look at these things in totality, especially in a case like this where you have people in a long-standing, loving, caring relationship that years after the fact, it becomes a crime. And, every relationship has ups and downs and tough moments and difficulties and adversity that gets ugly sometimes. But for it to translate to a space of criminal activity, in the midst of being in love and then continuing to be in love, it should be looked at and scrutinized really strongly. Yeah, I mean, look, domestic violence, there's no way to sidestep the behavior in that video. And, statute of limitations are what they are. There was no charges that could be brought up for it. But if you're just talking about the charges themselves in regards to sex trafficking and racketeering, it's just hard to take that instance and turn it into those charges. As egregious as that instance was, it just doesn't add up. It's just not aligned.
How has your life been affected by being such a high-profile witness in a case like this?
It's something that I have to manage because in forums like this, where you have people that's gonna judge it based on the facts, judge it based on the way I represent myself or whatever, is fine. I feel like to be involved in such a high-profile, ugly scenario, I've landed on my feet. But you still have a big portion of people that they operate on ideology and opinion, and I get DMs periodically, with women yelling at me saying I urinated on Cassie. How could you urinate on Cassie? So there is a negative aspect that I just have to maneuver through. But hey, look, where are some of our choices? This was a choice. This was a decision I made, and I'm just dealing with it. Trying to make the most of it to whatever degree I can.
You had barely any interaction whatsoever with Diddy in the entire time that you were part of their world. What are your feelings about him now that we know what he's been convicted of, and he's likely to face a prison sentence for some time? We don't know how long that will be, but it could be up to 10 years, very unlikely, but he certainly will go to prison for a lot longer than he's currently served. What are your feelings about him?
I really think I look at this situation with Mr. Combs similar that you see with a lot of people who are in very powerful positions for long periods. If they don't have a good circle of someone that can actually give them an opinion, a strong opinion, adversely, hear no, hear, listen, you shouldn't be doing this. A lot of these people do escalate to behaviors that push the limit. And I think this is a excellent wake-up call for him, because I'm sure he's looking at his own behaviors and his own histories, and he's rethinking a lot of things. And I'm sure he'll be a better person going forward for it. But, I think that's the silver lining in this. He is going to face some charges and some time for his actions. And I think going forward, it will present him being a better human to people in his circle and people he interacts with.
And finally, when you came on Uncensored last time, we had a few people leaving comments on our YouTube channel saying what an own goal it was for the prosecution to put you on the stand because it seemed to play into the defense's case. I think it played into the defense's case because of your honesty. Some even went as far as suggesting you must have been on the Diddy payroll. This has now become a raging conspiracy theory. Would you like to clear that up?
Yeah, I am not on the Diddy payroll. This was just my honest experience. And as much as getting caught up into the hype, which some people do, and they like to exaggerate scenarios and exaggerate circumstances, I just stayed true to the facts. And, I'm at peace with that. I feel like it kept my integrity intact. And I hope that all sides, the victims, Mr. Combs, everybody sees that that's exactly what I did. And it just stops there. But no briefcase dropped to me in the parking lot.
Sure, it's great to have you back on Uncensored. I thought it was a very powerful interview last time, and you influenced my thinking about this case very strongly with what you said in that interview and with what you said on the stand under oath. So I think you were a very important, as I say, cog in the wheel, actually, almost by default in Diddy's defense, because of course you were a witness for the prosecution. But I appreciate you coming on. Thank you very much.
Always a pleasure, man. Thank you for having me.
Good.
And I normally don't say this about Mayweather, loved my style of comedy. And so when Dave reached and Tina Graham, knock on the door, boom, boom, boom.
Right.
And baby took the whole community shopping. We was on Canal Street, shopping for everybody. But then he stopped at a Bentley dealership. He bought 5 Bentleys at one time. This is in the 90s, this is 1999, 1998.
Wow.
When Bentleys wasn't even out like
Right.
that. And I was telling my man, don't look at him because probably he's gonna get us a Bentley. You know, he has people just don't care.
Yeah.
And you don't want to make eye contact with him. So maybe you look the other way.
Yeah.
He might say, I thought that was gonna happen. I ain't gonna lie. But it didn't happen. But
You ain't get no Bentley?
No, we didn't get the
Okay.
Bentley. But baby was something else. And still in 1968.
I was born in 68.
You said all you could say is she was great.
What do you like now about the 6 decades?
Mhm.
If you can recreate any decade.
It's a rule. These people made you famous.
For sure.
In actuality, you work for them. And I rented at this club called Carlos and Charlie. Train.
Right.
Train. Because we know you're the best.
Right.
Tyree can't beat you.
Right.
But it was in Times Square.
I think if it all depends on what they're running.
That's so true.
If they run a 40, I think Tyree can beat him in a 40.
Yeah, I totally agree.
Now they run 100, he ain't beating him in 100.
No, and I'm quite sure if he was smart, he would run 100. Like I wanted to run Cat Williams. And
Cat will beat you. I got Cat.
Yeah. Cat called me on one of the radio shows, right?
Yeah.
And
I got Cat. I'm just saying I put my money on Cat.
Yeah, but I'm gonna tell you what happened. You know, when you're old, you think you're still that 19, 21-year-old kid. And when I saw Cat run, I said, I can beat Cat. That's the kid.
Yeah.
So I'm working out one day. I said, and it just, nothing happened. I just realized, you fall back from that mess you was talking about with Cat.
Yeah.
Because
you better pull up everything.
Yeah. No, I'm in good shape. But I know I ain't that fast.
Right.
It's a difference, right? And Cat called me. I was doing a podcast. Shout out to Cat. And he said, what's up, old man? He said, what you want to do about that race you wanted to do? I said, Cat, let me tell you something. I got to thinking. Doug, you can have that because I got a feeling. I said, I feel young, but I know that's that thing when you get older. You think that you're still as fast as you used to be, and you're not.
No, not even close.
I came in, when I run across the street, you know when you're in shape,
Yeah.
when you bounce.
Yeah.
Everything I do now, I feel like I'm stomping in the ground.
Heavy.
It's heavy. So you know what I mean, right?
Yes.
You don't have that, I don't have that bounce, it's gone.
Yeah.
It's gone.
Look, you had offered a critique of Cam Newton. Have you had an opportunity to talk to Cam? Have y'all had an opportunity to discuss that?
No,
and clear the air?
I'm glad that you brought that up because let me tell you what I thought. I said something to Cam, and I'm going to apologize. I'm going to tell you why. In life, you see people at a certain place in their life, and then they grow up and they become better people. And I saw his growth. And I'm man enough to say I was wrong because I saw his growth. Just like one time I said Kevin Hart wasn't funny.
Right.
And Kevin Hart's funny, but what I didn't see at that time was Kevin was a young kid. Comedy is based on experiences and maturity. And the older you live in this game, the more you experience, the more you become funny. And I saw that in Kevin. When Kevin did that host for
the roast for Tom Brady?
For Tom Brady, listen to me. I think I watched that show about 20 times.
Yeah.
Because Kevin was on fire. And I just truly enjoyed him, how he grew up to be a young man. His timing was impeccable. And I just saluted him. I watched it that much. And I even love seeing him on the commercials. He was born to do those Citibank commercials. What's in your wallet? Like I love that, right? Yeah, I thought that was phenomenal. So